Now, we know our job as church leaders is to give the ministry away by equipping the saints for the work of the ministry, but the reality is that you can't actually give that ministry away unless you have clarified it enough and simplified it enough to hand off. And I want to talk to you about 3 very different approaches to the way that that is done or not done. Now, often church leaders respond to giving the ministry away not in the greatest manner when it comes to a crisis situation. They think that they are the only people that can do it to the expected standards, at least. Now, they treat it like as if they're the Iron Chef. Now, the Iron Chef says, hey, I don't know what disparate ingredients I'm going to get on Sunday, and only I have the experience, the insight, the special, unique knowledge to whip up something palatable. Not only palatable, but to take these ingredients and make a great tasting cake to serve our guests. So they sacrifice giving the ministry away on the altar of excellence almost every single Sunday because they think that they are the only people that can do it to that standard. They're going to deliver a 10 out of 10. Now, the next approach is grandma. And grandma is wonderful. Everybody loves grandma, and she knows how to make the cake, and she makes it great every single time, and we all love it. But the problem is, she never takes the time to write down the recipe. It's all in her head. All the steps and the order, everything is still there. And let's be honest, there may be a bad grandma or two who enjoys being the only person who knows how to make this very special cake. But let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Regardless, it means that she never actually gives the ministry away either. She never shares it with anyone. She just does it herself. And it's not anything against grandma. It's not an excellence issue or probably not a pride issue. She just hasn't taken the time to write that recipe down. Now, finally, we have the cake in a box approach. And cake in a box is great. And guys, it's an 8.5 or a 9. It may not be a 10, but it's still funfetti and it's good. So it says, hey, here are the ingredients you need. In fact, I've put a lot of them together for you. You really only need to add a couple of eggs and some oil. Mix those for 2 minutes. We're going to have some steps here. Set your oven timer, slide the cake in, and we are going to get a great tasting cake every time. And this process is scalable. This process is repeatable and actually practices Ephesians 4. And we effectively give our ministry away. So our job is to identify the places where we've been locked into an Iron Chef or grandma mindset, and then document the steps, the essential systems, the strategic handoff that happens from ministry to ministry. And then we need to look for ways to simplify those processes and reduce the number of steps by removing the trivial good and removing some of these processes from our ministry. Now, if your organization struggles to get past this is the way we've always done it before mentality, then you should probably check out another course that I did. And it has a specific one in mind that I'm thinking of called Breaking Path Dependence. There's a whole framework there. And I'll be sure to link to that in the notes of this session. Now, once we look at ourselves, we need to look at our key leaders and volunteers in our ministry and categorize them in one of these mindsets and help them move toward the cake in a box approach as well. Now, one of the handiest tools that you have at your disposal is a good old-fashioned checklist. But you may not be aware of where they came from or why they are so important. Did you know that prior to World War II, almost any pilot could fly almost any plane, whether it was a crop duster or a fighter plane, because the controls were so similar? Then along comes a thing called the B-17 bomber, the Flying Fortress. And it was called the Flying Fortress for a reason. There'd been nothing like it before, and our best and brightest test pilots, they kept crashing it into the ground. And the test results showed that it had been human error time after time. The problems were simple enough and they were easily avoidable, but pilots forgot to do something or they did it in the wrong order. And all these little things actually added up to something that was really complex for us to handle. So how did they solve it? Well, the flight check was born, and it completely changed those statistics overnight. And we have a similar opportunity here. Once we have simplified our ministry processes as much as possible, we need to go through the process of creating a checklist or two to dramatically improve the effectiveness of our volunteers. I've given you a template that teaches you actually how to document a checklist. So it's almost a checklist for checklists. It's how to build it. And I'm also giving you a few ministry examples from the library of checklists that we have on Ministry Grid. Now we have one last step before we wrap up this whole process. And that is, how do we rapidly onboard these volunteers?